and it's going to have a percentage. That percentage is the amount of hydrogen peroxide in that container. So, if we zoom in here, I'm going to do this for a second. Oh my goodness, here it is. So, if we zoom in here, this 30 volume has 9% hydrogen peroxide. What that means is if you had a barrel of 100 ounces, that wouldn't be a barrel, that would be
a container.
A container. A very tiny barrel. A bottle, a container, of 100 ounces, it would have only 9 ounces of hydrogen peroxide. The rest would be water, making it 91 ounces of water and a little splash of hydrogen peroxide. Your household hydrogen peroxide is equivalent to, was that going to be your next question?
No.
Okay. Your household hydrogen peroxide that you use to treat your wounds is going to be equivalent to 12%. So 40 volume.
So why do they have like two different numbers? Why 5, 10, 20, 30, 40?
Yeah.
And then below it, they mess it all up by adding the percentages. Why not just label the bottles with,
The percentages.
you know, the percentages?
Yeah, why is there 10, 20, 30, you know?
Right, so I'm going to explain that now.
Okay.
You're jumping ahead just a couple.
Ready to go.
Just
Well, let's
a
go.
skosh. Okay, so the reason. The volume is the amount of oxygen that it produces.
It's the amount of.
So the percentage is the amount of hydrogen peroxide per water in comparison to the amount of water in the container. Obviously there is clear developer and then there's cream developer. Cream developer is essentially hydrogen peroxide in lotion, is kind of sort of what it is. The only difference is consistency of application, and certain products require a thicker developer than other products. Whereas Paul Mitchell, the color, the original color, is mixed with beeswax. It has a beeswax base. Do you think you need a really thick developer or a thin developer? Thin, because then it applies like pudding versus something
Sludge.
manageable, like gravy, right? You want it to be more the consistency of gravy than pudding. So it really comes down to getting to know what product are you using. Whereas XG, the color XG, because it is a synthetic base, it needs a cream developer, because otherwise, if you mix it with a clear developer, it's going to be like water running on the hair and doesn't stick. It's too thin. So that's really the only difference. Clear developer and cream developer are the same percentages. They create the same amount of oxygenation. The amount of oxygen that they provide is the same. The only difference is the texture and consistency of the product and how they mix. Yes?
So like the higher the volume, the more like potent and stronger it is because it like it'll lift more.
So the developer does 2 jobs in your color. The first job that it does is it actually removes natural pigment. So there's a phrase that color does not lift color. And this is where it's really important to know, what does each job do? Or what job does each ingredient do? So then you can understand how it is working and why it works the way it works. Your hydrogen peroxide or your developer does 2 jobs. The first job is to remove natural pigment. We talked a different time about OxyClean. OxyClean in your laundry only works on natural stains, correct? So if you spill juice, great. If you spill ink, not great. It's not going to get it out. So ink is synthetic, it can't lift it out. However, a natural stain such as juice or spaghetti sauce or tomato soup, one of those, OxyClean is an excellent lifter because it only works on natural pigment. Same thing as developer in hair color. Hair color can only lift natural pigment. So if you have virgin hair meaning you have never colored it, not even a semi-permanent or a demi-permanent color that you feel has lifted away or rinsed away. So it only lifts natural pigment. So your natural melanin molecules that are in your hair, the developer is going to be what removes those. The second job of developer is to oxidize the dye molecule that is in your tube of color. So they need to grow. Now we said, if you leave those color molecules in a bowl in open air, they absolutely will oxidize by themselves. It's just going to take an enormous amount of time. The other thing is what's in the tube of color will not lift out natural pigment. So if you were to squeeze out a tube of color and paint it on the hair, if it's going darker, then yes, it would eventually work. Eventually. It'll be a long process. Your developer is going to cause those molecules to expand in size and oxidize to their color. Make sense?
Question.
Yes.
So, it removes natural pigments.
Yes.
What happens if there's unnatural?
It doesn't do it.
So what happens?
So, this is what happens. A lot of times people, when they go, again, to get box color at the grocery store, you see the little pictures on the side of the box. I'm sure you've all bought box color, correct?
No.
Okay.
I've looked at it, but not
So-
bought it.
You should go look at it sometime, just to know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and it says, this is where you are, this is what you'll look like. Natural, and it says natural hair. However, the way people think, well, my hair's close to that color right now. It's not natural. It's not natural hair color. So, could it work a little bit?
A little bit.
Possibly, if you still have natural pigment in your hair. So if you have gone darker in the past, and you have artificial color molecules living in your hair, and you put color over the top of it, if you have a few melanin molecules still in there, sure, it could possibly eat out some of those. But it will not touch artificial color. It won't do it. So if there's a question on whether or not your guest has had artificial color or not, go with using a lightener because the color will not lift them. And it's all colors across the board. Color does not lift color. So we need to be very careful. When we're talking about melanin, we say pigment. When we're talking about artificial color, we say color. Color is color. We don't dye hair, we color it. Yes.
So, let's say you got someone who dyed their color dark, like at the salon. And then a month goes by, and now they want different colors. Like they want lighter color, or they want to go back to blonde, or maybe they want to throw some blue in there. So like that's not the grocery store box
Right.
color.
You still
But
have to
it's-
lighten it. So there are people that say, well, my so-and-so can lighten my hair, get my hair lighter without using bleach. That is not true. They are lying to you. They are absolutely lying to you because that's not the way it works. Color does not lift color. It never does. It won't do it.
So what happens if you put a developer on your hair?
If you put developer on your hair. So here's a couple things. So, color or developer. If there are some color molecules that are called a progressive dye. Just for Men is the one that comes to my mind. You guys have probably seen a news anchor that has like a jet black mustache. Because what happens is they're going gray and they have light brown hair. So they get a little Just for Men, put it on there, right? Then it starts to grow out a little bit, so they put a little more on there. It has progressive dye, so every single time you apply developer or hydrogen peroxide to that hair, those color molecules are going to get larger and darker in color. So they continue to develop and progressively get darker over time. There are a lot of colors on the market that are like that. And so if you had those kind of colors in your hair, that's what's gonna happen. There's also other color lines. I've had guests that I don't know what kind of color they used, but I did lightener on their hair or did color removers to try to get rid of the color in their hair. And then you go in to try to put color on it and their hair instantly turns black, like within seconds. And it's because as soon as that hydrogen peroxide comes into contact with those dye molecules, they blow up and they're just huge and dark. Regardless of what color was in there, they just do funky things. So I always am like, please, there's one girl in particular, I'm like, please, for the love of God and my sanity, don't put stuff on your hair. Like, stop doing that. But there's people that they're like, oh, I just love what you did, but then they're like, I just on a whim wanted to put something in my hair, and it just trashes it. What's that?
So then what do you do if your hair's black? Like if that happens?
Freaking nightmare. It was literally an all-day process, and then it's like, now what do I even charge you? Because what I really want to charge you,
It's $100 times 10.
yeah, it was like $1,000, but no, I think I charged that girl like $200 because she was in my chair for 6 hours, and it was because her hair constantly was turning back to black. And it wasn't even black when she started, so it was like the dumbest thing ever, just stupid.
What did you do to fix it?
So how do you fix that?
So I would do a process on her hair, and then I would deep condition her. Then I would bleach her, then I would deep condition her. And then I literally did this back and forth to try to get that color out of her hair and get it unoxidized.
I bet her hair was bright.
It actually, I did the deep conditions on like Olaplexes in between each one. That's why it took so long. And her hair was fine. I was like, thank God I know how to keep the hair together, but otherwise it would have been trash.
So she was saying how like if a client comes in with like the darker hair and they want to change it to something lighter, or they want to add glue, whatever, you said to just lighten it. So the only thing to get that color out would be bleach.
There are also called color removers. Sometimes they work, sometimes they do not work.
I did that in the truth right there.
So color removers are kind of, you have to be really careful with them because they're what's called a reducing agent. So we think about our color molecules, they go in an oxidative dye and they grow larger and get trapped in there. A reducing agent shrinks down those color molecules so they rinse out. However, if those color molecules did not fully rinse out, that's when you again put developer on there and they instantly reoxidize and blow up and they're still in there. So it's really a toss up on what they do. We will get into lightening next week because lightener, it's really easy to get confused between what color does and what lightener does, and they are totally different. So we'll talk more about that on Monday, just so that we don't cover too much. But as far as your developer goes, developer does 2 jobs. What are its 2 jobs?
Removes natural pigment,
Oxidizes color molecule. Excellent. What does the volume mean?
Oxygen.
Yes.
Volume.
The amount of oxygen it produces. Or if you think about like jets on a hot tub, and you have low jets and they produce a little bit of bubbles. Then you have high jets, and then you have those jets that create big bubbles and it like expands out of this hot tub, right? Kind of like that. Or if you want to think about, does anybody use those Alka-Seltzer tablets?
Yes.
So imagine putting 1 Alka-Seltzer tablet in there, you get a little bit of bubbles, right? You put 2 Alka-Seltzer tablets in there, more bubbles, so it's creating more of that bubbly effect, right? So same with your developer. How we utilize which, or how we determine which developer we need to use. It depends on the product you're using and what your goal is that you're using, and the base of the product. So as far as your cream versus clear, it's really just texture of product and which one it really needs to make the red texture.
So like the deeper the color, like the darker the color, maybe.
I get it.
Okay.
You're literally just like a minute and a half ahead of me.
Sorry.
So you're getting there. So as far as deciding which volume to use, so which developer or which percentage to use is based on what product you're using and what your end result is. So let's first talk about virgin hair. You have a guess that they've never colored their hair, so they're 12. Just a joke, but I was like, and nobody laughs. But anyway, so virgin hair, and they want to go lighter. The really easy way is using your developer number, so the volume, to determine what developer to use. If they're wanting to go 1 or 2 levels lighter, you can use 20 volume. If they're wanting to go 2 or 3 levels lighter, use 30 volume.
I'm not understanding.
3 or 4 levels, 40 volume.
So like this thing.
Yeah.
So let's say they're at like a 3.
Yep.
And they want to go to a 5.
How many levels lighter is that?
20?
How,
Oh, so
How many
3,
levels?
1, 2.
2,
So that's 20.
correct,
So you would use a 20.
or 30. What do you think would make a difference on whether you use 20 or 30 volume?
The type of hair, the fine, medium, and coarseness of their hair.
Excellent. So if you have coarse hair, you have more helix coils, right? You have more cuticle layers,
So you would need more.
so you have more melanin in there. So you bump it up, go with 30 volume. If you have fine hair and you want 2 levels of lift, 20 volume is probably fine.
So if they have a 3 and they want to say go to like 10.
You can't do that with color.
Oh, with the development.
So with color, you can only get 4 levels of lift.
4. Oh, okay. So if they have a 3 and they want to go to 7, that's 4. So if they have like medium hair, you could go with like 40.
Correct.
And there's nothing higher than 40.
Correct. The only other option is there's something called double 40, which does not create 80. That is something that I see all the time. And like on Facebook groups, there's like these hairstylist education forums. And then I'm like, and every now and then I have to be like sometimes I just scroll past. Other times, what are you looking for, my friend?
Little rubber bands, because they said they would be in the.
They're in the bowl over here.
They're right there.
They're right here.
However, there's a whole bunch in the dispense.
There isn't.
There
Unless
isn't?
they're in the cabinets, but there's none in the little drawer.
Oh, okay.
I just need a little handful.
Go for it.
You're welcome.
Does the volume developer affect the amount of time it needs to process?
For lightener. Yeah, for lightener, but not for color. Yes.
So that was just virgin hair.
Virgin hair.
Let's say their hair is the color.
And they're going lighter?
Yes.
Lighter.
Not developed.
So developers only for natural hair, like, or.
So lifting the color or a permanent hair color can lift hair up to 4 levels. Now, when you're talking about that guest that has really dark hair and they want to go a full 4 levels of lift, you can use a high lift color, which we are going to get into more next week in our blonding system. However, so you could use that even though they're not wanting to be blonde, but they're still wanting a full 4 levels of lift, you can switch them into a high lift color, which has higher amount of ammonia, so that door's staying open longer. You mix it with double the amount of 40 volume, so there's more oxygenation to be able to go in and eat out those natural melanins, so you can do that and achieve that full 44 levels of lift. However, if they have color treated hair and they're wanting to go lighter, you absolutely need to use lightener or bleach. Bleach, but we always call it lightener. Yes.
If they have super fine hair, would that cause breakage if you go too high on the volume?
Not necessarily. So color is very, very intelligent. If we're talking about color versus lightener, color, when you're putting hydrogen peroxide on the hair, it is going in and only eating out natural melanin molecules. It is not affecting the hair structure. Hydrogen peroxide is actually an acid. So it is not aiding the softening and swelling of the hair. It is simply oxidizing dye molecules and removing natural pigment. So there's something that years ago people would spray or pour hydrogen peroxide in their hair and then they would go suntan because then their hair would turn blonde in the heat. And it's because hydrogen peroxide simply eats out natural melanin. You could also pour the same hydrogen peroxide on your tomato soup stain on your shirt and it's gonna lift it out and remove it because that's what hydrogen peroxide does. Peroxide and developer does not affect the structure of your hair. So it does two jobs. It eats out natural melanin and it develops or oxidizes your color molecules.
So the higher the volume, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more damaging?
No, it is not more damaging. Unless we're working with lightener. So I always say color is very, very intelligent. It's only eating the melanin molecules. It is not destroying structure. When you get into lightener, when your developer is mixed with lightener, lightener attacks everything. So it's going to eat up the color molecules that are in there, and then it'll start attacking hair structure. So yes, if you put 40 volume with lightener on hair, absolutely it's going to cause damage. Every time. 40 volume in color is not causing damage. It's doing the job that it was meant to do with color. So that's why I always try to say lightening hair and using hair color, two totally different ball games. It's like soccer versus baseball. Not even soccer.
So,
Kickball versus baseball. They kind of resemble the same kind of deal, but they're not the same sport at all. You can't play them at the same time. They're not interchangeable. They don't even use the same tools.
so
Make sense?
color is used for colored hair, lightener is more for your virgin hair?
No, color would be for virgin hair.
Color would be for virgin hair, lightener is for color.
So, permanent hair color can go lighter and it can go darker. So depending on the product you use, if you are going darker on a guest, if you are using the Color XG, which is European formulation, 10 volume is permanent hair color. If you are using the color, the American color, the packaging looks different. XG is a black tube. The color is a silver tube. If you're using the color, 20 volume is permanent. Why do you think that would be? From what you know right now.
Synthetic versus, natural and beeswax?
Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. So, the ammonia is very, very low, right? You have beeswax that is adding more conditioning agents to the hair. The ammonia is so low that door is going to close quickly. So you need more developer, more oxygen to be able to go in, eat up the natural melanin faster to be able to oxidize those color molecules before the ammonia evaporates and closes the door. Make sense? So that's why permanent hair color with the color has to start at 20 volume. But what you will notice, if you use 20 volume with XG, you will absolutely get a level of lift. So even if you're trying to go darker, your hair color will end up lighter every time. Because developer eats up natural melanin. It has more product that opens up the door. So now you have developer that's working faster, even though it doesn't need to. And now you end up with, it's called hot roots, where that natural hair ends up being slightly lighter.
So we talked dark to light, what if someone wants to go from light to dark?
Right, and that's what we were just talking about. So light to dark, with the color to be permanent, you need to use 20 volume. With XG, 10 volume is plenty. Because we're not, developer does two jobs. Removes natural pigment and oxidizes molecules, color molecules. So, if you're going darker, you need to just consider which product you're using and does it require 10 volume or 20 volume. If you are going lighter, the developer that you choose is going to be the amount of lift you can achieve with that product. Does that make sense? And that's where it's really important to just understand what does the ingredient do, so then you can know how to utilize it effectively. So ammonia does what? Opens the hair, right? Opens the cuticle, opens the cortex. Your base does what? Protects. It holds it all together, conditions, right? Your color molecule obviously adds color. Your developer, it has two jobs. It removes natural and it oxidizes. Deal? When you're able to understand what they do, then you mix color and you apply it and you see what the result is. It'll either be, yes, exactly what I was looking for. Otherwise, if it's not, you can be like, oh, it's because I used 20 volume or 30 volume and I didn't need to. Make sense?
Do you usually use a 40 volume in a lighting service?
For lightning? No, I usually don't. Depends on what lightener. Matrix lighteners are garbage, and you have to use 40 volume. They will not lift. With Paul Mitchell lighteners, do not use 40 volume. It'll eat through that hair in a heartbeat, and quick, it lifts. So 20 volume is plenty. So it all varies in where you go. However, the thing to remember is that the ABCDs of any color line are the same. And you know, permanent hair color has to have something that opens up the hair. So when you go to a salon and they're teaching you about color, you can say as a professional, okay, so you say it doesn't have ammonia, what's in it, right? You can ask those questions. What am I working with? Like, how is this working? Because then you'll be able to troubleshoot those guests and the challenges that you have. You'll be able to answer those questions and figure out what may be going on. Your developer is always the same.
So when you go to a salon, you don't always get to pick what you're working with.
Correct.
You have to work with what they are.
Yep.
Unless you work for yourself or you work at a salon that works, like, that has like all the gym products.
So like the salon that I work at, Rumors, is a Paul Mitchell focused salon. So we use all Paul Mitchell, which I was super excited about. When I worked for Penny's uses Matrix. And so I had to learn it. One of the things that's really weird, and I always appreciated about Paul Mitchell, they're very, very open and transparent about what's in their product. A lot of other companies are not transparent at all. They have a lot of proprietary information, which means it's for us to know and you to never know. And we don't have to tell you, is what that means. So when they say proprietary, it just means we're not gonna tell you what it is. But you can learn knowing what you're working with. You can try products and say like, that doesn't really work. Like their lightener, for instance, you have to use 40 volume every time. And I was used to Paul Mitchell lightener, where 20 volume is plenty. Occasionally, I would use 30 volume on a guest that had like really, they call it browned out hair. Somebody that colors their hair the same color over and over and over and over. The ends of the hair become so filled with color molecules that when you go to try to lighten it out, it doesn't even budge, like it just doesn't do anything. And so I would occasionally use 30 volume, we have DPL, dual purpose lightener, 30 volume to get it to eat through some of that buildup of color molecules in there. But with the matrix lightener, you had to use 40 volume every time, or you would end up like baby duck orange every time. Like there was no getting around it, and it just didn't, that's just how it was.
Can you use, like different levels of lightener on different parts of the hair?
Yes, absolutely. So, the one thing to remember with lightener, and we'll get to it more next week, is that lightener, if a lightener can get to 7 levels of lift, that's a common number. A lot of times we'll say 7 levels of lift, or up to Redken's lightener is up to 7. All of, there's a lot of different lighteners on the market, and usually a lightener will go 7 levels. The developer that you use is going to depend on the speed at which you get there. So your 5 volume is gonna still get you that same exact 7 levels. It's just going to be moving like you're riding a bicycle, right? Just real slow. It's just getting you there real slow. Whereas a 40 volume is like getting in your jumbo jet to go the same distance. So it's still gonna get you that exact same point, but it's going to be much faster. Yes.
So, you say like 7 levels. Okay. So obviously a 1 can't go straight to a 10.
Correct.
But what if that was their end goal? Could you go like 5 levels, do them 5 levels, wait like 2 weeks or whatever, and then have them come in to get to their 10?
So here's where, as your professional opinion, and protecting the hair. So I would say, you know, my goal for your hair is to preserve the integrity of your hair. Anybody could trash another person's hair, right?
Yeah.
So what is your goal? Are you so insistent on having a level 10, or do you still want hair?
Okay.
Because a lot of times, and that's why ladies of color, when they lighten their hair, if their hair is like white blonde, that is an extension, that is not their hair. Because any more than that, their hair will melt apart and fall off. So a lot of times, like ladies of color, their hair, if they lighten their hair, they end up being in that yellow-orange range. And that's what's reasonable. That's how that's how light you can get it. And I mean, it is okay for you to go and get extensions and put them in your hair so you can have blonde highlights. And that's an excellent option for your guests that want blonde highlights if their hair is too dark. The other thing, like with lightener, the way that it works is it really attacks the whole entire structure of the hair. So it's kind of like a Pac-Man, where it just is going through and just eating everything that it comes in contact with. Or maybe like a really poorly trained dog, and they just chew on everything. Like I found, so my niece lives with us, and she has her dog, and it's this big dog. It's not really a big dog. She's like the cutest dog, super dumb, like really dumb dog. But I found, like, so I have my little dog. She's like really tiny, and she doesn't chew up anything. Like she's like such a good dog that she will not, like if you leave food on the table, like a low table, I say this, one time she did get up on the table to eat something, but usually she won't. Like she knows, like a box of donuts fell on the ground yesterday, and she just like sat there and was whining, like, these donuts just fell on the ground. I'm like, kinda want you to let me know that I can eat one, but they were from Saturday, so they just need to be thrown away. But anyway, where's her dog? Poor Kona. She just goes and chews on stuff. So I was cleaning the girls' room on Saturday and found like a little toy horse with no feet left, no legs. It is now legless horse. So I threw it away. But it's like, you know, there's if you think about that, like, it just eats everything that it comes in contact with, like, it's gotta chew up everything. It's not going to just be like, oh, here's a little molecule of food, I can eat this, and I can eat this one, and pick out the ones that are good, like little berries. It's just like chomp, chomp, chomp through everything. And so if it's on the hair long enough, it'll absolutely just melt through the whole hair structure. Yes?
So when you're on the floor, how do you determine if you wanna use